I like to think that's a perfect segue into our little bit of a clickbait news I want to get into this week. So the Undertaker making headlines this week. So he just out of nowhere made an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast this week, which a lot of people were shocked and just surprised by it. But nonetheless, made for a pretty entertaining episode, a little under 3 hours long. I think it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but I did see some comments online as for some people saying he didn't really say nothing too new that we haven't heard already versus what he said on Stone Cold's podcast or the WWE Network stuff. So I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but nonetheless, I think it's probably a good move for Undertaker to be on Joe Rogan shows, the biggest podcast in the world, and reach a whole new audience. And I'm sure for the new people that are listening for the first time, it's a lot of new stories, or it's new to them, I should say, those stories being heard. But the big thing that came from this that got a lot of fans just wild up and back and forth, and Twitter went crazy, people leaving, the keyboard warriors out there leaving their comments, more or less.
Nerds.
Undertaker,
yucky.
To sum it up, the big line that he said that got a lot of people all furious was Undertaker says the current WWE product is too soft. And just to specify on that, so here's an excerpt from it that I found online.
Do you want to do it in your Tanker impression?
I can't do a Taker voice. Well, Richard, can you do a Richard voice?
I can. I just choose not to.
All right.
Can you do a Taker voice?
I can. I just choose not to.
Well, see, I'm bad at I do a Texas accent.
Howdy now.
Howdy. Well, now.
Oh my God, you sound just like Ron Simmons.
Oh, damn. But anyway, so here's the quote. This is what Undertaker said as far as, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast and gave his thoughts on the current WWE product. And in response was kind of negative. And so he said, quote, "In that era of guys, too, men were men. You got into a dressing room today, and it's a lot different. I remember walking to my first real dressing room. Half of them had knives and guns in their bags. S got handled then. Now you walk in, and there's guys playing video games and effing making sure they look pretty. It's evolution, I guess. I don't know what it is, but I just like those eras. Man, I liked when men were men." And so
I concur.
So a lot of people were reacting to this, and there was another quote that he said later on. Let me see. Joe Rogan was asking, about the current product, and he was asking to get in trouble for saying this, and he says, So Joe Rogan said, "Do you enjoy WWE as a fan, or are you too close to it?" Undertaker responded, "I try. It's tough right now for me because the product has changed so much. It's kind of soft, Rogan then asked, "Are you going to get in trouble for saying that?" Undertaker said, "Probably. I'll probably piss a lot of people off, but they need to hear it. It is what it is. But to the young guys, here's a bitter old guy. I'm not bitter. I did my time. I'm good. I walked away when I wanted to walk away." He should have been saying that like 10 years ago. But anyway, I just think the product's a little soft. These guys here and there have an edge to them, but there's too many pretty and not enough substance, I think right now. And there's a lot more to it. There's a much bigger quote about it. And just to sum that part up, it was about how he thought during his era, like the prime years, like the Attitude Era, all these guys were coming up together at the same time. And then they just left and he feels maybe didn't do enough to help the next generation.
I 100% agree with that.
So
100. I've talked about that with wrestling buddies of mine for years, because it's like, you think about it, Austin and Rock just gone. They weren't passing the torch to anyone. Triple H and Undertaker were really the only two that stuck around to do that on the big stage, kind of scene, because there was people that went to TNA, like Kevin Nash, Booker T, Kurt Angle, so on and so forth. But even then, Kurt Angle's still a rookie because he debuted in '99. So it's kind of like he's at an elite level, but he's not a veteran. Like, it's kind of wild.
Yeah. So let me just look here at this quote here as far as when you're talking about the veterans and stuff. I guess, it's interesting to think about this. So there's a lot to break down here. I guess let's first talk about just the concept of this generation is soft compared to like his generation.
They are.
In what sense? How would you, what makes them softer now than like, 20 years ago?
Size, brawling. No one can throw a punch anymore.
Yes, I agree on
So, I mean, that got exposed last week when Triple H was throwing punches with Randy Orton. Like Triple H, no one has a punch that good. And Triple H wasn't a guy 10, 15 years ago that you would say is one of the best punchers, but now you would because he's the last guy doing it.
They all do like forearms now.
Yeah.
Into the neck.
that. Jeff Jarrett, too,
And,
as well.
and that had been around. I mean, I don't remember seeing Kevin Nash throw a fist. I always remember seeing Kevin Nash throw a forearm. So,
Yeah.
but I think, I mean, if you were to put someone at the same level, let's say Cesaro in a match with Rick Rude, two kind of guys at the same kind of level, Rick Rude would eat him up.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against Cesaro, but like, come on, when you're comparing people at the same level, you're losing to size. Like the high flying stuff they can do all day, but like, it's kind of like when you see something done to Keith Lee now or Walter, where you might do something high flying, but they're just or Samoa Joe and they shove you off. Like the guys back then were like the smallest guy back then would be like one of the bigger guys now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, okay, a couple things. And for the most part, I agree with Undertaker is saying. And
they're better. They are better athletes now.
Yes.
I just like he's not saying that they're not. He's just saying that they were tougher guys, and they were.
And I think to a certain extent, it's just how I think people who are current wrestlers or superstars, how they treat the business, how they go about everyday life around the business and what they do in and out of the ring. It's just a whole lifestyle that's just different as far as what it means to be a wrestler in today's world versus back then. So like I said, there's a lot to layers I want to break down here real quick. So, okay, as far as, like I said, I agree with him to for the most part what he's saying. I think a lot of people are really misinterpreting some of his words and not understanding the full bigger picture of what he's trying to say. He's a guy that's been so close to the business for 30 years. Even
if they're not misinterpreting what he's saying and they're still taking it to an defense, he has been in that locker room for 30 years.
Yeah.
So he's seen it change. Like I've heard other veterans, like Stone Cold, even say on podcasts that the first thing a wrestler will do now when they get back from a match is go to social media and check out what the feedback is, which is just like, why? Like,
yeah,
like they're not dictating to you if you're good or not. Like social media is the worst place to go to.
Yeah, go talk to your agent, your road agent, or the producers, or whoever help book the match. Whoever are like their quote managers or coaches behind the scenes. Ask them for feedback. Use them for that. People who have been in the business a lot longer than you, who've had that experience, it can help maybe grow you into a better performer out there. Instead of reading comments of, like I said, clipboard warriors or people who never stepped in a ring before. And sure, might have watched it for years, but they don't know the true ins and out of the business and how to make it work. So
they never took a bump.
Yeah, so don't read all the Twitter comments, YouTube comments, or whatever, DMs to kind of dictate how well you're doing in and out of the ring. So as far as, okay, Undertaker, I could see how some people might get upset because they say, oh, he's just an older guy back in his day who thinks his era was better than the current product.
Not it was.
I mean,
he's at the tail end. Think about this. He's at the tail end of the 80s.
Yeah.
Like when all the biggest stars from the 80s are coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and those are the biggest stars of wrestling ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
He then transitions into the new era, the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era. He has seen more eras of wrestlers because if you think about it, from the 30s to the late 70s, wrestling is the same everywhere for the most part.
Yeah.
So when it changes is the 80s and then the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, and he's been a part of the change eras of wrestling.
Yeah.
So he has more, and he was a part of the older era. He came up in USWA and WCCW. So He's seen it all.
So for a couple things though. So like initially when I heard him say soft, I'm thinking, well, I think to a certain extent, and when he said people are more pretty today, I mean, part of me is like, well, yeah, I think today's wrestlers, as you said, Richard, they're better athletes today. They're better, like, as far as athleticism in the ring, bell to bell, are much better. And so, therefore, they take better care of their bodies and whatnot. So if you look at someone from, like, the bodies of the majority of the wrestlers today versus bodies from the 80s, it's night and day as far as just these big, heavy-set dudes who just
Hulky guys.
throw haymakers versus the more ripped and cut performers today who do like CrossFit and all that crazy stuff. So for me, it's like you look at it back then, those guys in the 80s and stuff who were, not in the best shape, who party pretty hard and die at a young age. And also at the same time, like they look much older than for their age versus guys today who take better care of themselves, who look young. I mean, the best examples like Earthquake, who in his
or the Godwins.
Yeah,
if you look at the Godwins in WWE or F at the time, they're in their 20s.
Yeah, I mean, but like Earthquake, like when he made his like initial first run, he was in his late 20s, but he looked like he was 45 years old.
Yeah,
and I think that the best point was like I think someone said like AJ Styles, how great he looks at what was he 42, 43 now? Yeah. So I
think you also can look at it as them being pretty because they don't have scars. From blading or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just how WWE treats their talent as far as the way they kind of perform in the ring, and like no more headshots and the blading, all that stuff. Yeah, that's a good point as well. But also you got to think about in today's world. I think WWE, ever since they really went public, from a business standpoint, I remember, God, who was it that told me? But when they went public as a company, it was kind of like a mandate for all WWE superstars to start dressing better when doing public appearances and really how they conduct themselves. Back in the day, like in the 90s, you see all these guys wearing jeans and, fanny packs and like a cutoff sleeve shirt, walking out in public. Now today, a lot of the superstars are expected to wear suits and be clean and cut and all that stuff. And so that's part of just the evolution of the business from a business standpoint. And you got social media and more public appearances. So, they got to probably have, better tanning and dress themselves better, do all the workout stuff. And so, I mean, that's where I think, sure, if you're someone that's older and came up in that more gritty, back in the day, you see these guys today and they all look like a bunch of pussies to me. Well, it's just that's how what's expected of them as WWE superstar today. So that's, one excuse I'm trying to explain.
But he's been there through it.
Exactly.
So it's not new. He's just saying what it is. He's laying it out, the truth.
Yeah. And so, that's one thing I think for Taker, maybe, I don't know if he fully understands that, maybe kind of the expectations from WWE superstars today of why they kind of conduct stuff. But I will say this, what Taker, to a certain extent, about the video games and stuff. Now, granted, I'd rather have WWE superstars play video games and maybe goof around doing that type of stuff than doing some of the bad, crazy things they were doing in the 80s that would really hurt their bodies. But
let me turn this around on you.
Okay.
How would your coworkers act if you started playing video games at work? You brought your console and you're playing at work.
They'll be like, well, why are you not doing your actual job?
No. I mean, like when you've got some downtime, are they gonna think, oh my God, like what the hell does he think he's doing? Like he's acting like a child. That's how I look at it. Like I would get butchered for doing that at my job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most people will. But I think, in WWE, a lot of these superstars are making a lot of money being video game personalities now and all that stuff. But what I'm trying to get at is I think to a certain extent with Taker, what I agree with, I think a lot of these superstars don't take the wrestling business serious enough and focus their attention on too many other avenues instead of taking the wrestling aspect or as a whole more serious. Case in point is Ethan Page from Impact Wrestling, or formerly of Impact Wrestling now. I remember in the last like 6 months, like his stock has really gone up in the last like 6 months with the success of the North.
Well, since he got into really good shape as well.
Yeah, since he got into shape, the North were so successful, title runs, and he was doing like a lot of other stuff, Twitch and YouTube vlogging and a lot of other stuff. And I remember he was really serious about saying like, you know, I'm Julian. This is Julian. This is not Ethan Page. He was going by his actual name, his shoot name. And so for me, he that's the thing. And that's why I was kind of taken back.
Like wrestlers can't like, the Undertaker, it took him 30 years to break his character. Like even though I'm not watching him anymore, I know I can still see his tweets from time to time, but MJF never breaks character.
Yeah. So that's what I'm leading to. That's a great example. So for me, what I'm getting at with Ethan Page, as much as I love him as a performer, as a wrestler, he really, once he leaves the arena, he really separates himself as just Julian and all these other avenues. So he just more or less says wrestling is just his job. And that kind of hurts me a little bit that he doesn't take, it seems, the business as seriously as like an Undertaker.
Yeah. Well, look at another good example before he got called out for all of his other exploits is Joey Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who was the king of sleaze and putting dick lollipops in people's mouths. And then the second he's on Twitter, he's talking about how this is an art and this is an art form and we're playing characters and it's acting. And it's like, this is why you're not signed anywhere. So
and that's where I do agree with Undertaker as far as these guys are concerned about their look and presentation outside of the ring and not focusing enough on the actual wrestling business. So I do agree with him there that and that's, like I said, Ethan Page or Joey Ryan, you said, are examples where it's like when they're outside the ring, they're concerned about other aspects of their life and not taking the business completely serious as other people have, like an MJF.
And the worst offender to me, the one that's offended me the most with it, and this is before he went to AEW, is Jericho. And it's not because of his books, it's his podcast. He had Kenny Omega and Don Callis on immediately after that match, the first match he had
in New Japan,
and they exposed how this whole thing came about, and it was just like, why are you doing this right now? Yeah, like this is no.
I was shocked by that. How, you know, I love Chris Jericho, but I was shocked. Like literally, like less than a week after that match, they broke down the whole thing in like how Don Callis put this together. And I was like, whoa, because I loved the emotion and the buildup for that match, the back and forth, the backstage like press conferences and them fighting. I loved all of it. And then, like a few days later, like, oh, yeah, we're friends. We wanted to do this together.
Sterilizes it. It sterilizes it.
Yeah. So it's like all that great emotion was like gone like that. Yeah. So that's where I do agree with the Undertaker, how I think not enough people take the business serious enough and do all these other aspects. Like, listen, I mean, I have no problem. People go make your money. Go make as much money as you can at your most popular point in your career, your peak of your career. But I don't know, have a little more respect for the overall business.
And you should always be thinking about your character. Another one, for instance, would be 4 or 5 years ago. I remember WWE took a trip to Europe, and a bunch of the wrestlers went to the Roman Coliseum and took selfies together.
Yes.
And it was a bunch of people that were feuding, like the whole Wyatt family with all the Shield guys and a couple other people.
Yep.
And it's just like, aren't these guys feuding right now?
Yeah.
And then they're posting it on social media, and it's like, this is one of those photos that needs to be saved for much later.
I know, and that's the thing. Like kayfabe, like Undertaker, like I always will respect how serious he took kayfabe, and I'm with you. Like these social media really kills kayfabe. All these guys and gals who are feuding are really like best friends outside the ring, and it kind of hurts a little bit. Like it just, for me, from my emotional involvement, and that's what makes wrestling so much different versus any other entertainment show out there. It's that's the one industry where people expect the person on TV to be the same person out on the street versus, any other TV shows. An actor can be this character on a TV show, but when they're on the street, they're their normal selves.
And Undertaker's come from that world of kayfabe, so much so where he knows wrestlers like Roddy Piper who got stabbed or shot at, or while they were protecting the character.
And that I'm glad you brought that up. And I remember, I think it was at Stone Cold's or Jake Roberts. I think it was on Joe Rogan. He said, like, kind of the reason why they had to carry weapons is because the fans were crazy and would attack them because they took their character so seriously. So I think partly the weapons in the bag comment, I think, is kind of maybe loosely connected to that. So
have you heard the story of Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods?
No, go on.
So he was in the famous airplane crash that Johnny Valentine and Ric Flair was in.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a baby face on an airplane with heels.
Oh, okay. I know what you're going. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So he messed up his back real good. Flair broke his back. Johnny Valentine broke his back and became a paraplegic from this. And someone else was on there that's escaping my mind, but passed away. And because Mr. Wrestling was trying to keep kayfabe, he had to check himself out of the hospital and go wrestle the same night that he had an airplane accident to protect that he wasn't really the guy on the plane, even though he was.
With these guys that he was feuding with, or it's like, I mean, that's the Undertaker.
And I'm not saying by any means that guys today should go that far, but what I'm saying is that there were people that went that far to protect what they have, and then these guys just throw it away for social media likes.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is I think a lot of these guys who try to be pretty, it's kind of weird, like these tough guys, and then yet they take all these poses and selfies on Instagram or whatever, and them in these high fashion suits, and they're posing with each other, trying to be like models and stuff. And I'm like, I mean, I look at them like, come on, like I expect you guys to be these badasses in and out of the ring. And you guys all like
this is the pose that they need to do. That's it.
Just arms crossed.
They don't want it. They don't want the photo to be taken, but they have to take the photo.
Yeah. And so that's kind of one thing about social media is I don't want to say specific names, but there's some guys I follow and I'm like, I look at their photos lately and it's like, man, you guys, like, I mean, imagine, Terry Funk or something would slap the S out of them with how they conduct themselves out of the ring. So I get that. The one last thing I want to touch on is, so as far as Taker says, like everyone aging out, and could they have done more to help the next generation? Because the next generation were just working with their other peers and trying to figure things out, how to keep the business moving along. I mean, part of me is like, yeah, sure, they all kind of aged out and they were gone. Do you think maybe they should have done more as far as putting other talent, younger talent over, or
Yes, 100% yes.
But then, is that ultimately their fault, or is that just the booking? And like, for example, Vince McMahon.
No, I don't blame the booking, because the booking was still good when they were leaving or getting let go.
Okay,
like it's not even close, because like so many guys just left and went to TNA because of the lighter schedule and they got guaranteed money.
Yeah.
And look at AJ Styles. He was there throughout all of those guys going there, and he picked up everything from them, and he's probably the best active wrestler alive on the planet right now. So I think in terms of WWE, they lost that bit because they were building up the newer stars. So, they still had Undertaker, Kane, Big Show, Mark Henry. Who else?
From the Ruthless Aggression era?
Like Attitude Era holdouts through the Ruthless Aggression era.
I mean, Triple H.
Because if you, look, we lost Rock, we lost Austin, we lost Eddie early, and we lost Benoit early. And those were supposed to be the guys after, or Eddie and Benoit were like the
Jericho took time off as well.
Jericho took time off. Booker T, Kevin Nash, Kurt Angle, they went to TNA. So it's like
Sting was in TNA the whole time.
Yeah. So then the guys that are left are like John Cena. John Cena bored the hell out of me until probably Bray Wyatt coming around.
Really? So even Thugonomics and
no, CM Punk. That's CM Punk.
Okay, CM Punk. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it's just kind of like you're like, it's funny that people complain now that WWE has all these old guys around and they do these Legends Night, but it's like for 10 years they didn't do that at all. And it's probably 10 years that people like weren't tuning in as often.
Yeah. So I guess for me, my big thing is, okay, if Undertaker feels that maybe not enough of his peers from the Attitude Era did enough to help the next generation. Okay, you got the Performance Center now, and he did compliment Triple H for the work he's been doing, try to help him and Shawn Michaels and what they're doing at the Performance Center, trying to help groom the next generation that we see on NXT and stuff. I don't know what it would take, but have Undertaker, have Stone Cold, have some of these other guys come, be like guest coaches or something. But like have more. But see, that's the thing. So that's why I'm surprised Undertaker didn't acknowledge that with Joe Rogan, be like, hey, I have done some guest appearances there, so I'm trying to do my part and help them. Not necessarily in the ring like a one-on-one match in front of a crowd, but like behind the scenes, I'm trying to pass on my knowledge. So I that's something I wish Undertaker would maybe explain more. And Joe Rogan, he doesn't know all that, and he wasn't going to go into that conversation.
No,
that part of the conversation.
Nor does he care.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something I think a lot of people who were criticizing Taker, it's like, keep in mind, they do have, guest speakers who come to the Performance Center and help out. So, I mean, they are doing their part as far as trying to, be a coach.
And if you are critical of the Undertaker, what the hell do you know?
Yeah.
Really? Like, what's your experience in the locker room?
Yeah. And so, and like I said, I mean, and the other thing too is, think about it. What Undertaker is saying can be applied to all the other different sports out there.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. The athletes today: NFL, NBA, NHL, and baseball, MLB. Like their locker rooms and how they conduct themselves and what's treated to them. Tommy, what you said, the very luxurious lifestyle that they all lead.
But
it's different than the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing for those sports compared to sports today.
Yeah.
Like it's hilarious to me when people try to compare basketball today to the Bulls in the 90s. It's
or the
like
Pistons in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Lakers,
it's just like
Lakers and Celtics the 80s.
You've got no clue what you're talking about when you say that. You're just saying that, but you didn't live it.
I mean, the NBA players today, like on defense, you can barely touch them. That's why these guys are just throwing up all these shots, scoring all these points. But back in the day, like in the 80s,
to be brawls.
The guys were getting clothesline coming down the lane.
Yeah. And they were just trying to fight their way to the box out to get a rebound or whatever,
Dennis Rodman's whole persona was to psych you out.
Yeah, exactly. So what Undertaker is saying could easily apply to other sports and how they didn't have the same luxury lifestyle people today do, athletes do today versus back in 70s, 80s, which made them probably feel a lot more tougher and grittier and really go out there and earn every single thing that comes their way versus today where it seems like a lot of things given to them. And therefore your mentality becomes a little bit softer in many ways as well. You expect all the guaranteed stuff.
Probably the lowest person on the totem pole as a wrestler in WWE now probably makes double what they made in the 90s for someone in the same position.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a list of the different salaries right now of some of the top stars. It's shocking. I mean, I imagine what these guys made today versus what they made in the 90s. I mean,
like Shawn Michaels.
Inflation, I know that counts, but
like The Rock made something like $1 million in 1999.
Wow.
I don't remember where. I think it was his first book.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, wow.
Yeah. So I guess ultimately to sum it all up is we agree with Undertaker as far as I think a lot of the wrestlers don't treat the business as serious as they once did back in the day. Now, as far as the more gritty guys, I think just athletes today do a better job taking care of themselves, and rightfully so. We want them to have long, living, healthy lives. But at the same time, with that being said, you're having such a great life now, put it back into the wrestling business and make it more tougher and aggressive again. So, like I said, it's very subjective, but I think Undertaker has so much great knowledge in his brain that I would love to see him just keep passing it on, paying it forward to this next generation, hopefully turn the tide. And here, how about this? Conspiracy theory. What happened if Taker said this as a way just to get the locker room going? Like, I'm hypothetically, what happened someone like Vince or something told him, like, hey, you're going to do this interview? Say this, and that will get my locker room, my roster, amped up again. I'm just saying, hypothetically, it's conspiracy theory.
I at the same time, I think there's a fair amount of people that probably took, like in the locker room, that took offense to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you watched the other show.
Yeah.
Look at who their trainers are. Arn Anderson Dustin, Dean Malenko, Jerry Lynn. Who else is there?
I mean, Tully Blanchard's there as a manager.
Tully Blanchard, Dustin Rhodes,
Mm-hmm.
Jake the Snake Roberts.
Yeah, Jake's there. Yeah.
When you watch that show, do you think they're taking direction from them? Or do you think that they're giving them information that they're probably not going to use? Because what does the old man know about modern wrestling?
I would hope, like someone like Lance Archer, who's being managed by Jake the Snake right now. I would hope. Now, I know they're not traveling as much. They're all stuck in Jacksonville with their weekly shows. But I would hope maybe during the day before they start recording at night, I would hope and I would imagine Lance Archer is, during this whole time period over the last year, picking Jake's brain for every single thing he can think of.
Doesn't he lose every week?
He's kind of being rebuilt as a dominant monster again, but as a baby face now. But he was losing for a little bit. But so anyway, that I would hope, like FTR, who are being managed by Tully Blanchard, I hope they are picking Tully Blanchard's brain, and Arn Anderson also there in the backstage area picking their brain.
But those are WWE guys. They don't need that kind of coaching.
True, yeah, because they've already got a lot of that already for their years. But yeah, I would hope someone like a Jungle Boy or some of the younger talent on the roster are taking advantage of these veterans back there and pick their brain. So no,
does it look like they do? Honestly, yes or no? Honest answer.
I mean, some of the storylines, no. I think some of the storylines are very convoluted and there's a lot of plot holes.
Matches, though, when they're agenting the matches, because each match has an agent. The guys that I just listed as their agents, does it look like that this is a well put together thing?
It's still like a very indie style of matches.
Yeah. So they're not listening to them. They're probably getting direction. And I'm not saying WWE doesn't do this too, because you see this on WWE a fair amount. Mm-hmm. There's some stuff we'll get into in this episode that I'll speak on because So no, but nonetheless, like you said, overall, I loved kind of what Tanker had to say, and hopefully that will get some a light of fire in some people's asses, and maybe hopefully kind of change the landscape of pro wrestling. Hopefully this will create like a wave long term. So it makes you wonder how many of these guys would actually, if they were allowed to, would actually blade if they had the opportunity.
If it was okay, like it was an okay thing. No, the Miz. No, I got a movie to shoot.
Yeah.
Morrison. No, not my pretty face. Undertaker, you can't take it. So anyway, no, it makes for a great conversation. Just makes you kind of think about just the business as a whole. So we'll see how this all plays out over the course of the next year and whatnot.